Welcome back to That Rugby Podcast, hosted by the Sports Booth. My name is Luke. That is Hughesy. Luke, Hughesy, as I try and get over the cold that I'm battling. That's obviously jumbling with my mind. A good win for my All Blacks. What can I say?
It was a good win. I would not say it was an entire game of dominance, and we'll come on to that when we discuss the game. We've got a few games to talk about this week, though. Obviously, the other game in the Rugby Championship, which was a thriller, not in Manila, but a thriller in I can't make South Africa rhyme with Manila, but and we also had some Pacifica action with Fiji and Samoa and Japan and Tonga, as well as a little bit of European action with Scotland and Italy. But obviously, game of the week that we have to talk about was obviously Bledisloe #1 in the MCG. As you said, a win for your All Blacks, who I think you could say second half of dominance. I think for sure. The Wallabies, I think for the first 20 minutes of that game, were on top. We're matching up blow for blow with the All Blacks. We're ahead on the scoreline. We're running harder. We're tackling harder. Scott Barrett's first tackle there, incredible read. I think that was a massive misplay from the Wallabies. We'll get onto that. We have that noted down. I know. But first 20 minutes, I think the Wallabies were on top. A few hiccups here and there from Carter Gordon with his kicking. I think the MCG is a unique environment to kick in, but matching up well. But then it's the sort of classic things that happens in these games. It was I think Sean Maloney on the broadcast said it well, is who's going to flinch first, and the Wallabies flinched first. They let in that try from a maul, a really well executed maul, and they flinched a couple times when they had pressure on the All Blacks goal line as well, going for a maul when it obviously wasn't working and not ripping it out of there quick enough. And then they flinched first. They let in that try from Cody Taylor, and then that's when I think the old voices in the back of the Wallabies' head started coming in and saying, you've got to make a play now to get us back on top, otherwise New Zealand's going to run away with it. And they tried to make the play too hard, and we saw it from players who are characteristically cool under pressure. We saw Marika Koroibete make a couple of mistakes. We saw Nwangani Tawase make a couple of mistakes, and these are two of the Wallabies' most consistent and best players. We saw other mistakes around the park as well, and that's what I think the big takeaway from this game is the All Blacks. I don't think there was outskilled the Wallabies. I think they out-toughed the Wallabies and they out-disciplined the Wallabies, which is what New Zealand rugby is about. That's how New Zealand rugby plays, cold and clinical, and they took apart the Wallabies. The Wallabies gave them an opening and they ran with it, and that's when they started showing that flair. Was once they started opening up the Wallabies, once they got that pressure on, that's when they sort of burst through with more of their attacking skill. And I think the Wallabies will be really disappointed by that, because once again they've done it themselves. The referee I thought was excellent in this game, Wayne Barnes. I think he called a very fair game.
Agreed.
Very fair game. But yeah, the Wallabies again, they just sort of, it's the mental and physical discipline and toughness and fitness, I think, which is going to be, that's very hard to turn around before a World Cup in 2 months' time.
Yeah,
less than 2 months, in fact.
I'm going to argue against your point. Not entirely. I don't mind you saying that there's not that big of a skill difference. I think there is a skill difference in those 1%. You know, in those, and again, the way I've started to realise how the international rugby is going is there's the teams that can complete the 1%, which I think are the top 4 teams in the world, and those teams that on their day they can, but when they don't, that's where the difference is. So, you know, your France, Ireland, South Africa, New Zealand, when they complete those 1% at a higher level than you just can't keep up with them. You need them to have a bad day at the office, and you complete those 1% at the moment. So I think there's that with that. That's
I'm gonna argue back on that, because I don't necessarily think that's skill. And I think this is actually arguing about, this is a positive for those teams, right? And I say it's actually high praise of them, because that's the culture they've developed. That's how they train. That's how they bring up their players. That's what they've developed, right? That's what they've built. That's hard work, right? And there's no substitute for hard work, right? Hard work will beat talent, and that's what I'm saying. I think that New Zealand outworked Australia and have been consistently outworking Australia for a long time now. And that's where I think the difference is that New Zealand and those other top 4 teams in the world outwork everyone else. Absolutely outwork everyone. I'd say those top 4 teams outwork the next 4 teams, right? Or the next 6 teams, right? In the top 10, the top 4 teams, outwork everyone else. Because you look at your Fiji, your Tonga, Samoa, your Pacific nations, there's a lot of talent in those ranks. A lot of talent. And we see that flair come through. But there's a lot of the discipline mistakes. There's a lot of the toughness mistakes. And it's a lot of that hard work mistakes that they just don't have compared to the top 4 team. Because, you look at those rosters, they are full of talent, full of physical specimens, but it's that hard work part of the game. And it's not saying they don't work hard. I'm just saying those top 4 teams have got it figured out. They work hard at the right times in the right areas. They know rugby so well. They know what they need to do to win these games.
But then to counter argue your counter argument, then that is a skill. That's a skill they've developed. If you know what I mean. That's where I think. I see what you're saying.
I think it's a coaching skill.
But I think it's a player's skill as well, where we get to the point where these players are able to complete those 1% skills at the level. And again, I see what you're. I don't think there's a if you said especially looking at Rob Valentini and Ardie Savea, I think 2 fantastic players to look at. Neck and neck. There's obviously Ardie's got the 7 back kind of background, whereas Rob's always been a classic number 8, big, strong runner. You wouldn't say that between those 2 players, there's that much ability difference. If I watch him on the field, the way especially Rob's playing, there's not that much ability difference. I just think that it's those 1%ers that gets Ardie over the line, which, again, as you said, have been built over long periods of time with the culture and everything. I totally understand. But in the end, it becomes a skill point of view because they can't complete
I'm following
those
you now.
skills.
I'm following with you now.
And we're on the same page.
I think it's also and I think you're right in saying the ability is the same level. And I think as well it's a coach. It's sort of a unification of coaching, team chemistry, and individual skill. It's a unified across those 3 because you as a team you have to be so much on the same page as well to execute a maul kill like what the All Blacks were able to execute against the Wallabies. That is teamwork. That's I
just want to add, just as you continue, one more. I think depth as well plays a key part in that. I'd say that's the fourth wall of your house there. I think they are a little bit deficient compared to maybe Ireland and France is some of that attacking skill where they can, no matter how well the opposition is lining up, you can inflict a play on them, right? Because what I saw in that first sort of 40 minutes from the Wallabies was really positive, and it's really, especially the first 20 minutes, right? Snuffed out the All Blacks, right? They were able to hold on to that position. They were able to, even when New Zealand had the ball, they forced some errors and stuff in there, which I don't know if you necessarily see that from an Ireland or a France, who I think are I think they're the top 2 in the world rankings at the moment. And I think that's probably justified at the moment. Totally. And
I think New Zealand's right there, but I still think those 2 are above them. And I think that is something. If I'm an All Blacks fan, as great as this win is, I would be looking at the first part of that game and thinking for 30 minutes, 35 minutes, without that Scott Barrett read, we're shut out for 30, 35 minutes by the Wallabies, which is scary. I'm not saying that as in the Wallabies are saying it's scary because the Wallabies are good. I'm saying it's we're the All Blacks. We're looking to win a World Cup. By this point in the game, South Africa had put 20 odd on the Wallabies.
I'm not too worried, to be honest, as an All Blacks fan. I'll tell you why. Because of the fact that the All Blacks game plan was quite clearly different to what we used against South Africa. We were attacking that blind side. They were obviously had set up a different game plan and were trying something else. And I sat there and I watched it. And as you say, we weren't breaking you yet, but I had full confidence that we were. I just felt like it was that we knew, or the team knew, if we hung around for 30 minutes and broke those Wallabies down, we would end up winning this game, would outlast them. And it felt like that's what they were trying to do. It was kind of like the old, heavyweight boxer going to a body early, just hitting the body punches, getting them tired, and then we'll kill them. And then there was that kickoff where they decided to go wide and pretty much made a break. And that's when I was like, okay, we're really on tonight. Like, this Wallabies team's it's unfortunate for them because they put up a good fight, but once we decided to really flick on the switch, I just felt like, that was what was happening. It was more of from my point of view, and again, I probably should be more nervous from this, but I just felt like we were breaking down our opposition, which to me was really good to see because we're going to have to do that. Like, we didn't do that at the last World Cup.
That's going to be my next question.
England.
That's my question for you now is how confident are you that you can do that? Like, in your pool, you've got France, right?
And our first game of the World Cup is France.
Yeah. That's you've got France, and you've got to do that against France, all right? And then if you come second in your pool, you've got to then do it against the winner of Pool B, which is either South Africa or Ireland. I'm picking Ireland for that to win that pool. Or if you win your pool, then you've got to go against South Africa and do that. So, look, you've got to do that against two of those three teams. Yeah. You've got to be able to do that. I'm not sure. I would love, I'm always a Southern Hemisphere over Northern Hemisphere, and everyone other than South Africa. So I would love for the All Blacks to do it. As much as it would make you smug and everything like that, I would prefer that to happen. I don't know if that will happen. We'll see. Again, that's the beauty of this World Cup. We got a lot of quality teams going into this World Cup.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
That's I think though, again, a strength of New Zealand, and that's why they beat Australia, is that you're absolutely right. That is the game plan. Is they knew they had to hammer the Aussies for a half, and then they break open in the second, which is what happened, right? And it even happened a little bit before then. I think the Wallabies were unlucky with injury, like losing their captain and Tupou, right? So Angus Bell had to go on, who had a fantastic game, by the way. I think Angus Bell, one of the lone bright spots for the Wallabies, and him and Will Skelton. I think Skelton is cementing himself as one of the best players in the world right now.
My issue with Skelton, and it's a good issue, is he was your jackler for the ball. He was your jackler. Like, if anyone was going to get a steal, it was him. That's the issue for the Wallabies. Tom Hooper tackled his heart out, made 30 tackles, missed 5. Didn't get a single jackal. You were missing a Fraser McWright and Michael Hooper. I just sat there and I was like, when Skelton, who, all credit to him, you could see him eyeing up breakdowns with that height and just being able to get over. Strong body, was in good positions, was doing, like, again, it's not a bad problem to have for Skelton. This is my problem, was the fact that he shouldn't be doing that as a weapon. He should be doing that at opportunist moments. And you have your Hooper and stuff using that as a weapon. It was just, I was like, Tom Hooper is nowhere near a breakdown where Skelton was. So that was a big one thing I noticed. I was like...
And I have to say, I was disappointed we didn't see... At least I can't even remember seeing Langy Gleeson this game and Rob Valentini shifting to 6.
Well, that's because Langy Gleeson wasn't on the bench.
I thought he was on the bench. No, I thought he was supposed to be on the bench.
Rob Leota, and he came on.
Yeah, like I would have done. I like Rob Leota a lot. I actually probably wouldn't have put Jed Holloway in this game. I would have really liked to see Rob Valentini at 6 and Langy Gleeson at 8.
Yeah.
To just, I love Holloway. I actually think he's probably a better second row option at the moment for the Wallabies than Nick Frost is, because I think Skelton and Richie Arnold are guns. I think they're both excellent when they're on the field. Not 100% sold on Nick Frost. I think he's all right. I think he's serviceable, and for pool games he'll do fine. I don't trust him in the big moments. Sort of similar to a Matt Phillip, but I think he's better than Matt Phillip.
I think he's better than Matt Phillip. He's not a Dean Mum type. Like, he'll actually do something for you. He's just.
I think Holloway's just a better option.
Yeah.
I really. Yeah, I would have liked to see Gleeson get in there, because I think he's another one. I think he's a hammer, and I think when you go up against New Zealand, you have to hammer, right? Because that's what New Zealand did to us. That's what we did to New Zealand for 30 minutes. But then we didn't have enough left. And I think you're 100% right about the depth situation. It's going to be interesting with this one coming up, with Alatoa definitely out. Tom Lambert's been called up. I actually rate him pretty well. He played well for the Waratahs this season when he was on the field in place of Angus Bell. Taniela Tupou, I haven't heard much about since the game. Wait to see what that was. But at least it was a different issue to what he'd had. It was a rib issue. I've had rib injuries. Fucking painful. Horrendous. I don't know how he's going to be able to play. And they suck and they take a while to heal. So I don't know how he's gonna go. He's gonna have to tough that out or get some cortisol injections before every single game and at halftime or something like that, because it is, or cortisone, I should say. Oh, I don't actually know. It's cortisol something, but
cortisone, I think,
yeah. I don't know what cortisol. I've heard cortisol as well. I don't know what that's for. That's probably some eye medication or something.
We're not doctors.
Yeah, we're not. We don't come to us for medical advice. Yeah, because I'm the fucking idiot that broke his ribs and then went and played a full season of rugby. That's not smart. Which meant I broke my ribs again the next year. So
I would say we're not going to see a lot of Taniela Tupou into the Rugby World Cup. I don't.
Yeah, and I think that's for the best. I think put him on ice, get him healthy again,
get him into bubble.
Yeah, and even, I don't know. This next Bledisloe, I think Eddie's just got to keep tinkering, keep moving pieces around, and see what he's got in some other pieces. I wouldn't be surprised to see a lot of changes in the squad this week, just so he sees what he's got, see what he has. I think some other positives from the game. I think the three best players for the Wallabies were Bell, Skelton, and Valentini. I don't think any of the backs had a great game. Nwangani somewhat, but not his finest performance. Probably one of Marika's weakest performances, but I think that was not just him. I think there was other things. Carter Gordon was decent. I think he's a tough one to be thrown into. I think we sort of saw what you said was right, was that when you're thrown into the cauldron with the pressure, it can affect you. I think we saw that with his kicking, right? Although I think a little bit that's to do with the MCG. The players none of the players, and you actually said this as well, none of the players were allowed on the ground in the days leading up to the game, New Zealand or Australia, because of the fucking AFL.
Exactly.
Right? So that's, you're not used to that environment where it's a totally different stadium. It's an AFL stadium, not a rugby pitch. And that you could see that he was in the first half when the wind was not with him, that the kicks were offline. I think he did well with ball in hand. I think other than his kicking, he did well with ball in hand. I think he was decent in defense as well for what he was asked to do as a 10. I think he needed some more support from his forwards, as your half and your fly half need. You need a little bit of support sometimes. Can't all be Luke Bowden's. I think he was all right. Tate McDermott for me was actually disappointing. I think he had some poor decisions, especially either the first or the second maul. I think the second maul where New Zealand stopped it, he should have taken that ball out of there much earlier. He could have taken it out of there and gotten it away. He made some good. What I liked is that he tacked the line a bit, and same with Carter Gordon. And I still think the pair of them were better than the Nick White and Quade Cooper pairing. Totally. Quade for me, I don't know. It's just, I think his age is showing through. He's just not providing anything when he's there. I mean, the game was sort of fucked by that point, but in the last two games as well, we've seen he's been a passenger rather than the driver, which is what you need your fly half to be, the driver. That first lineup, and I know we're going to talk about this. We're supposed to talk about it after all these games, but I'm going to bring it in here. The Scott Barrett hit. First of all, excellent read by Scott Barrett. Excellent read. And a great hit as well. My second point, which is a question, is why the fuck are we running a four-man line out?
Four-man line out on 5-man line.
That's the stupidest thing I've ever seen. Like on your own try line. Like,
it's funny as when I'm playing rugby. It's not happening often at the moment with me getting sick every fucking 4 weeks. We had a game for West Harbour Foods up the West Harbour Foods. And our hooker, we had the same situation. We went to a 4-man line out, 5 out. And I just said, that is the dumbest shit ever. So as a first 5, I went and stood right at the back of the line out, right at the back, like 5 metres away, so on the try line. And of course, as every good hooker does, he overthrows it 5 metres out. The big number 8 catches it, tries to run straight over the top of me. I just bear hug him and make sure I hold him up. And I just said, look, I said to my hooker after the game, I said, this wasn't a judgment of you. This is a judgment of all forwards who ever go to a 4-man line out when you're 5 metres out from your own try line. It's just stupid. Like, there's just so many things that could go wrong. Go full 100%. Man, doesn't matter what happens, just hit that front pod, take it in, do something. Just, there was a lot.
For me as well, like, imagine if New Zealand steals that ball there and then pack down into a maul. Like, you've got 4 men there, right? Yeah. It's just, for me, like, I get why you have some forwards out, because you want to shield your 5'8", your rookie 5'8", who's kicking out of his own goal line. But first things first, you got to get the ball to him, right? Yeah. You got to get the ball to him. That's going to be your first thing.
You've got Samu Karevi, like he's one of the biggest 12s in the game, so he can crash it up. Yeah, there was a lot of questions from that play.
But for me, that one, I just looked at it. I'm just like, that's so stupid. I did love that. Our immediate response from that was that Marky Mark break and then the Rob Valentini try. So that gave me some hope there, and that was a positive sign. What I like about that was the positive of they got behind early, but they didn't let him affect him early. Like, in previous Wallabies games, they're like got a glass chin. You hit it once and they go down and they just sort of forfeit the game.
Yeah.
Right? Here they stuck in it, but it's about turning from a 30, 40-minute squad into an 80-minute squad. Yeah. That's the Wallabies' next challenge. And will they get it done before the World Cup? I don't know. Right? We're extremely lucky we're not in either Pool A or Pool B. Yeah. So, look, I think our pool or Pool D, with Japan's so-so performances so far, would have been all right to be in. But look, we're honestly in the best pool that we could be in for this World Cup, and I think that's a benefit to the Wallabies, because they get more games under their belt to keep improving and to take some positives away from things, and to be able to build that, because it's rough to go with a whole new coach and with a lot of new players, especially a new first 5, into the pressure cooker of the Rugby Championship.
Yeah. But
we saw
put yourself in this position. You put yourself in this position.
Oh, 100%. 100% put it. And I think I'm not... Look, when we took on Eddie, I said we got to be prepared for some pain, right? Because he's had these players for like... I don't even know how long before the Rugby Championship. Not very long.
He started in March, I think he came in.
So he's not been able to coach him for that long.
No, of course not. Super Rugby's been happening and stuff like that.
Exactly.
So, but even that, he's come in since March. What are we? July. So like 4 months. He's probably had to really be able to think Eddie's stuff. Like get the gears moving, and then probably a month to get his hands on the players. So, which is
not a whole lot of time, and I think to talk about another coach, and I know I'm sort of jumping all over the place here with our run sheet, but I think all this conversation is leading into one another, is Ian Foster. I mean, he's doing a great job with the All Blacks, but look how long it's taken him to do a really good job with the All Blacks. It's taken him to the last year of his contract.
Yeah.
Right? He's got the All Blacks firing on all cylinders, but he's got the players that he wants in there now. He's got them playing the way he wants them to play now, right? And you can't just say, oh, this is the players carrying Ian Foster. I mean, all the players are effusive in their praise of Foster and how he's letting them play their game, how he's managing the game to get them in the positions to do the things right. But that's taken him years to get that. Before that, he's been called the worst coach in New Zealand history, right? So I think, look, I think it does take time, and there's a reason they signed him to a 5-year contract, because they wanted him for the next World Cup's the goal, right? Even within this year, the Rugby Championship is pre-season for the Wallabies. He said as much, whether that's covering his ass or whether that's how he views things, who knows? We'll see by the World Cup. But people got to be prepared to go through some pain. Like, this is a rapid coaching move, because in the world of rugby, things don't move that fast, right? Things take time to develop. And of course, there's pressure on him. You don't lose your first 3 games of your second stint with the team and not feel pressure. But I think everyone just needs to relax a little bit. Tearing each other's throats out is not going to do anyone any good, right? The period when the All Blacks were at their lowest in recent memory was when everyone was attacking Foster, right? Since everyone sort of eased up on him, they've been doing better, right? Just take it easy, folks. And I started following Ben Alexander on Twitter, because he sort of followed up, or X now, whatever you fucking call it, because he popped up in my feed, and he said something that was really that struck me as really important. It's like, why are Australians tearing down Australian rugby? And I have an answer for it. It's because it's to make the people that are doing that, it's so that they don't feel hurt when Australian rugby isn't doing well or is suffering, right? Because they can then point the finger and say, told you so, told you Australian rugby is shit, told you we shouldn't have bothered. It's the same people that are like that when you challenge them to a competition, they don't enter because they don't want to lose, right? They don't want to put themselves on the line. They don't want to lose. They don't want to seem like they're emotionally invested in this team. But I guarantee you if the Wallabies were winning, they'd be on the fucking bandwagon. So that's why, Ben Alexander, that is why people are shit canning the Wallabies. It's to make themselves feel better or to make themselves not feel pain when the Wallabies don't do well. It's so that they can feel better than the rest of us. And it's a terrible thing, and it is a classic Australian thing, I have to say. It is a very, very Aussie thing to do.
Do you think that comes from, though, being let down so many times now by the Wallabies?
No, because I see it in other sports. Right, you see it in other sports.
In a row, that's a long time to not hold on to a Bledisloe.
But we see it with other sports, right? We saw it with the Socceroos in past years when they weren't doing well, when they weren't as good as they are now, or in the last couple of World Cups. People would be like, "Oh no, soccer is a shit. We're never going to get anywhere. Soccer's not even one of our sports. Oh, why are they calling it? We don't call it football here. We call it soccer. Same sort of thing." In rugby league, it's the same with New South Wales fans. Oh yeah, of course we're shit. Yeah, New South Wales shit. Queensland's better. You're from fucking New South Wales, mate. It's to just distance yourself from that. It's and I see it a lot in Australian sports. It's just we don't like to. We always like to put in the caveat before something's played, like, oh yeah, I said we were going to be shit, so look, I'm right, and so that way I don't need to feel bad about the Wallabies losing because I said they would be shit. So yeah, it's a very Aussie thing, right? It's a very, very Aussie thing.
The old classic tall poppy syndrome type thing.
Yeah,
someone's
exactly right.
Yeah, don't want to accept it. Yeah, so
exactly right.
I mean, the Bledisloe's locked away for another year, along with the Rugby Championship for the All Blacks. I'm just quickly to touch on the All Blacks' performance. I am most impressed by the defense because I didn't think we would hold you to 7 points. Especially with the way you were looking, like we've said in that first 20 minutes, I think you guys were better.
It was really impressive as a fan on the opposite side as well, watching how they just. That's why I said, like, all of the players seem to know what each other were doing. You have to have that level of chemistry and cohesion to be able to have a defense like that.
Totally. And then obviously the attack speaks for itself. That's what the All Blacks are known for.
Yes.
But there were 4 other games on.
This next one we're going to talk about is why I say the cauldron of the Rugby Championship. Not just the Bledisloe, but the whole Rugby Championship. Where all 4 of these teams are quality teams because South Africa at home just beat Argentina by 1 point. One point.
And you actually made a good point earlier, and we haven't touched base on it, but I've watched this game back now, and the difference of refereeing in both games, and again, we've talked a lot about referees in the past couple of weeks, but Wayne Barnes refereed that game so incredibly well. And even...
Look, I want to touch here and say referees will never get 100% of calls right, and there were calls that he missed in that game, but that's fine because he still overall had a fantastic performance and he overall got things right and he didn't inject himself in the game too much.
Totally. That was perfect. That last part, he made the calls he had to make. There weren't many nitpicking calls, and when he did nitpick, it was for enough of a reason to nitpick, if you know what I mean. Whereas I don't want to say it was bad refereeing in the South Africa versus Pumas game because it was also error-ridden. There was quite a lot of handling errors, quite a lot of stop-start. It was a very stop-start. Obviously, the injury to Grant Williams, I don't know if you saw that, but a charge-down kick. Yeah. And
I did see actually the
hip into his head. So that was unfortunate for his first career start, but there was images of him walking around at the end of the game. But it was just the control of the game was very different. And because of the stop-start nature, it definitely wasn't great rugby. It wasn't a great product for rugby. Yeah. Argentina really should have won this game, the way they played. South Africa, I think, will come away a lot happier knowing with the belief of their defence because of how fantastic it was, especially in the second half. They won't be happy where they were on the field for the majority of the second half.
Yeah,
the Argentinians... Yeah, that's not South African rugby. And the Argentinians, I think, would have won if Boffelli was playing because they missed 8 points with kicks. So it's a killer for Argentina. But I remember when I made my predictions at the start, I said this Argentina team, especially in that last game, is going to go close because the way South Africa have prepped for all of this, it's all to build up to that All Blacks game, and Argentina might sneak home. They just about did it, but I think they'll go on quite happy. Argentina going into the World Cup, they've got another warm-up game against South Africa this week, so I think they'll be upbeat about their performances.
Yes, and look, it just highlights how good this World Cup is going to be with teams like that playing the way that they are. I mean, Pool B. I mean, just Pool A. I think Pool B for me is the pool of this World Cup, right? Because you've got South Africa, Ireland, Scotland, and Tonga, who are now really like putting themselves up there. Like they've lost some games, but they're in all of their games, right?
I watched the final 10 minutes of that. So I switched over from the All Blacks to watch Japan versus Tonga. Holy heck, it was some good rugby. I love what Tonga's doing. They haven't played they won that first game against Australia A, where they probably played just about their best lineup. Havili, I think it's only Havili. I can't remember his first name though, so I'm sorry. The one who plays for the Crusaders just won the title with them. Signed with Minor Pacifica as well. He played at number 7 for them and just was a
David
presence.
Havili?
Well. No, that's the centre.
No.
Nice try though.
I'm thinking of the wrong Havili.
Yeah, there's like there's about 5 of them floating around.
I was about to say like Havili, like I thought he was an All Black.
David's in All Black. Then there's William, who's the first 5 for Tonga, and then I think it's Sione. I want to say Sione.
No, Saliva Havili.
Saliva, that's the one. I knew it started with an S. He was really good, but yeah, this Tongan team looks good. And if it wasn't
nope, that's the rugby league player.
Is it? Yeah, the Rabbits.
Yes. Yeah, I was about to say it is Sione Havili Talitui. There you go.
This guy knows his rugby. This guy
knows his rugby. It's Luke Bowden. He's a rugby player.
I'm a rugby player. That Tonga would have won the game if it wasn't for a try-saving tackle. Japan made a break. Tonga got an intercept. Was going to be in the corner for all money. Their team they defensively have looked the best they've looked in a long time. Just their stars on their team. I'm just like, man, yeah, like you said, that pool. If Scotland, South Africa, or Ireland take Tonga easily, thinking, I've got South Africa or Scotland next, they may get a rude awakening, I think, especially with some of the players. Via Fafita needs to be paid $1 million from someone because holy hecka, he is an incredible player. Look, Japan held on and beat them, and Japan, again, have convinced me that they're not quite at the point that they should be at where they have been in the past 2 World Cups. Looking at that pool, I go, Argentina's definitely favoured over them and England's favoured over them. And then Fiji beat Samoa and raced out to a big lead. I think it was like 19-0. Samoa brought themselves back into the game, but Fiji, too strong, held on. Yeah. Caleb Muntz, actually, this Fijian team, Samoa didn't name their best lineup, but this Fijian team, I think there was about 17 out of the 23 had played or play for the Judah. So that was really awesome to see in Fiji, those players giving back to the team and performing and winning the game.
Power with the likes of Sammy Radradra as well.
Exactly. That's what I just sat there. I was like, this is the closest you'll get to like Sammy Radradra playing for the Judah and just seeing all of these guys to go.
Sammy, come back, come to Super Rugby, mate. Come play for the Dura. You know?
How good would that be?
Yeah. Fiji's nicer than France, probably.
And just quickly talking, Samoa, I've got an interesting... I think I saw someone post Samoan lineup. It could be Samoan lineup of like Artie Savea and stuff played for them. But Richie Mo'unga's obviously last World Cup for the All Blacks as a Swede. Then he goes over to Japan. 3 years' time, he's only 31. He'll be able to now represent another nation. He is Samoan, and I'm thinking 32 at the 2027 Rugby World Cup in Australia. I think Richie Mo'unga will be wearing a Samoan jersey.
Yeah, it could. Yeah, could very well be. I think it would be great for Samoa as well.
Totally. And the last game, Scotland beat Italy in Edinburgh, I believe it was, in Murrayfield.
Because the seagull caused chaos.
The seagull. If you haven't seen that, just search seagull Scotland versus Italy. But yeah, they won enough. They didn't name their strongest team, and nor did Italy. So just 2 teams getting the warm-up underway, the autumn-summer series, as they're calling it. But obviously, those are the games that went this weekend, but we're obviously going to get back to one main point of this podcast, which is the Bledisloe. So I asked, how long can this run go on for? Is this going to go on for 108 years, as we talked about last podcast? But I do want to seriously go, how do we see you guys actually getting back the Bledisloe? Because I know there were glimpses of it there, but 20 minutes is an 80, and you've got to do 160, if you know what I mean.
100%. I think that next few years will be absolutely crucial because it's a four-dimensional approach to it. And I say that because I use the word four-dimensional very deliberately there because time is one of the factors that has to come into this. You're not going to be able to fix it in 4 months, right? Like people thinking Eddie Jones is going to fix 20 years of losing in 4 months. You're insane, right? It's going to take time. And you've also got, because that means that's time is developing players, is developing style of rugby, is developing culture, is developing habits, is developing chemistry. All of that stuff takes time. I think a mistake would be for the Wallabies to try and imitate New Zealand, how New Zealand goes about their preparation, how New Zealand goes about their business, because that's trying to beat someone at their own game, and you're never going to do it as well as them, right? What I think, and again, as I said, I started following Ben Alexander this past week, and he had a really good thing that made me sort of think was it starts with a lot of off the field things that we don't really think about in rugby. One of the things that we saw was the Wallabies couldn't do was match it with New Zealand for 80 minutes, and that comes down to fitness and mental fitness, and that's the things the Wallabies need to work on, right? Is their physical fitness and their mental fitness. So I think more training is sort of the answer, is working harder, right? You need to work harder. Don't need to work hard in the same way as New Zealand does, but you need to work harder in a way that Australians can work hard, right? Australians are a tough bunch, right? We showed it in 2 world wars, okay? We showed it in Vietnam too, right? Aussies are a tough bunch, right? And so I think it needs to be taken as a year-round approach, right, for these Wallabies things. I think Wallaby things need to be touching these players 12 months a year, right? Where Eddie might not be coaching them 12 months a year, but they have, and this is where it gets complicated with things like overseas club commitments and Super Rugby and things like that, because those clubs will have their own input as well. But there could be collaboration, right? Where you have their training programs and you're looking at what they're doing at club level, and maybe you're suggesting to their club, hey, we want them to be doing this. We actually want them to be working a bit harder like this. And we are paying them, so we do have input on what this player does, right? They are representing their country, so we do have input on what this guy does. More meetings with Wallabies coaching staff. And you can do that virtually. We've got the virtual technology to be doing that stuff. But I think Wallabies need to be more hands-on more months of the year. If we want to be great, if we want to be some of the best in the world, if we want to be the best in the world, we have to out-train everyone. We have to out-coach everyone. We have to out-think everyone and take it to that level, which we can do. I don't see any reason why we can't do that. And then obviously redeveloping juniors and subbies rugby and bringing up that level of things again. And that you can see that they're starting to do that. You can see that's a little bit of a trend starting to happen, but that's one element. That's not the be all and end all. That's one element of it. So there's a lot of things that need to happen, and it's not going to happen overnight. Might even happen within a year or 2 years. It's got to be a long-term thinking. You've got to think just beyond the Wallabies coach, because it's not all on the Wallabies coach. That's why I'm glad we've got sort of Phil Waugh in there in the position he's in now, because he's someone who's been there, done that, knows what he's talking about. Because as much as people say, oh, you need to have a business background, this business background, that, we've tried that. Hasn't worked, right? Because the business side of things only in sports only goes as well as the team side of things does, right? And so you need to get those results better, because that's what gets people coming back to the game. That's what gets people purchasing the subscriptions and stuff. It gets the revenue back in the game. So you've got to look at it at a reloading, right? It's renovating the house, right? You're changing things up, but you're not knocking it all down and starting from scratch. You've got solid bones there. You've got good bones. You've got history. You've got culture. You've got systems in place. It's about figuring out how to best use those and to update and add new features that bring things into the modern times.
So, saying all of that, putting a time frame, as we've talked about time 4-dimensional, if you weren't to say win it in the next 5 years, would you be disappointed? Would you be worried?
Yes, I think I'm sort of going to contradict myself a little bit, right? Because the Rugby Australia hired Eddie Jones for the 2027 World Cup, right? So I think that's going to be the end date of their plan, right? Is, you go in with business strategies and things like that and say, we are starting at this point and we want to end up at this point by this time. What do we need to do to get from point A to point B? So I think if we haven't won it by the 2027 World Cup, I'd be disappointed.
And then...
Because that's the time frame Rugby Australia seems to have in mind.
And then say you haven't won it in 5 years. How many more years before you start to really worry that you're never going to win it again in your lifetime?
I don't know. By that point, I've probably drunk myself to death. No, I don't know. I think it's just one of those. I think it is one of those things where you're like, it is. We'll see. It'll just make it. I think at that point, I would just take it year on year and just be like, hopefully, this is the year that happens. We'll see, and it'll be like one of those things like the Chicago Cubs, right? Which you said is the 108 years thing, and we'll just see what happens. I think what's great about this compared to the Chicago Cubs is that we're not competing against nearly as many teams. It's just one team, so the chances are higher.
Yeah, you're not wrong. Let's talk about two more players that I just wanted to highlight quickly. Starting with the All Blacks, Scott Barrett has taken his game to another level, like another complete level. Obviously, he's
always been the third Barrett brother.
He's been the third Barrett brother and the third lock. When you think about our locks, we've always had Sam Whitelock, Brodie Retallick. The hit's going to make the headlines, but his just performance the past 3 weeks and for all the Crusaders for this year, just been out of this world. And I go, yep, he's one of our two starting locks now. I don't know, I think Whitelock's going to come from the bench now. I think with the way Shannon Frizzell's playing, you don't need to start Barrett at 6. So I just sit there and go, this team, he's the way both of those two are playing, and especially Barrett, I just go, man, I even sat there and went, that could be our future captain right there. Wouldn't surprise me just the way he's playing.
Really well. Yeah.
And then lastly, touch base, obviously on Carter Gordon. Now, you've touched base, we've touched base on him. I was impressed as well. I want to go out there and say that. I think, other than his kicking game, the Wallabies looked a lot better with him on the field than they did with Quaid. Yeah. I think he didn't get many chances to attack the line, but what he did with his passing and just setting up the forwards, I think for that first 25, 30 minutes, and again, we harp on about the first 25, 30, it's not an 80-minute game, it is, but... And I think he missed a couple of key moments, the kickoff and his kicks. It comes back to his kicks, which with rugby nowadays, you can't lose a kicking battle like that, and you can't make those mistakes, which it's better to make those mistakes in your first game than in your 50th game and it's still happening, if you know what I mean. Hopefully he learns from it. But I think he will take a lot from that. I think anyone that's judging him too harshly off that performance, especially just because of his kicking, I think is jumping the gun a little early.
I think he was better in defense than what people were probably giving him credit for as well. I think it's what he was let down by Tate McDermott. Tate McDermott had a few lame duck passes out of halfback as well that skipped along the ground or didn't even make it to him, and a forward had to scramble to pick it up. That hamstrung a bit of his ability to then distribute the ball as well. I think he's. I think just it's sort of unfortunate to say. I don't think by his own play he's cemented himself at the 10. I think from Quaid's lack of play or poor play that Carter's cemented himself at 10. But I still think it's positive. I still think he's good enough. I think he's still going to be a great player for the Wallabies. And look, he's very young as well. We've got to remember that as well.
How old is he? 22?
He's 22. 22.
Look at that. Fuck, I know ball.
Yeah, 22. So look, he's got a lot of rugby ahead of him, and he's got another game this weekend, and then he's got he's got the Rugby World Cup, right? And he's got those pool games, which are going to be critical. I think actually Australia might have their hardest pool game first because we're playing Georgia, and then Fiji, which would be tough. Wales, which I mean depends what Wales side shows up. If Wales even shows up, and then finish off with Portugal, So I think Australia are blessed in that pool where they will have some tough games, but not some horrifically tough ones like in some other pools. And I think that's the best thing the Wallabies could have hoped for because it gives them the chance to develop over the course of the World Cup.
Totally.
Yeah, it's it sort of is what it is at the end of the day. What's the point of being overly negative? What's the point in being overly negative? You know what? If you hide yourself away and you never put yourself out there emotionally, you never invest yourself in a team, you'll never ride the high of the win like everyone else will, and you'll never get anywhere and you sit alone in your basement and be a sook on Twitter who supports the Tigers. So there you go. It's a very direct attack there at someone.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to our final point for today, which is our overreactions we will take from the Rugby Championship. So heading into the Rugby World Cup, a lot of these obviously will be based on that. My first one, we've got 3 each. I'll go first, you can go second, and then we'll go that way. My first one is...
Actually, can you do all three of those? Because all three of mine are linked. So
okay, yeah, let's do that then. Yeah. That's fine. So my first one is the game has moved past Eddie Jones's coaching style. Now, this isn't... Like, to me, what I wanted to say here is not that Eddie Jones is a bad coach, because I don't think he is. Obviously, his resume is up there. I just think his style is back where it was in 2003. It could work on a team like Japan where he got success, because that was a culture that just needed someone to be strong like that. I think there's too many voices, too many chiefs in Australia rugby, very similar to England, and I think just his style of coaching, the game's gone past that, where I don't think it's going to work for the Wallabies this time. That's where I'm coming from for my first overreaction. Again, these are
so
overreactions.
Why do you say that? What have you seen in his coaching style and game that makes you...
Well, I haven't seen a lot of positives. I watching the Argentina game live. Like, you guys scored 50 points in this Rugby Championship. You conceded 105. Like, I totally understand it's a new coach getting his hands on, but if this happened to Dave Rennie, he would have been castrated. And the thing is, the talent's not bad enough for it to be doing that. So I sit there and I go, you're not that untalented to let in 105 points. You're not, that untalented to not score more than 50 points. So what's going on here? And it has to be the style of play that you're playing to. And I know Angus Bell, I think, came out and said, we're just not executing Eddie's style of play. And I'm like, well, maybe it is a style of play. So to me, it's just the way that the structure and the systems haven't worked. That first game, we saw it a lot where they were kicking the ball a lot back to them. Yeah. And Eddie Jones has talked quite heavily about kicking the ball away and being with the correct kicks and this and that. And I just think the game may have gone to where Eddie Jones isn't.
I could see that. For me, I think it's great you brought up Dave Rennie, because what I haven't seen is too much difference from this sort of thing has happened under Dave Rennie as well. That's what's concerning to me, is that even though we swapped the coach, we haven't seen that much of a change, and that has me concerned. Is there something in the players? Is it a culture that it is with current Australian players that has made things the way they are? I take your point, though, and I do see some of those things as well. The amount of kicks is concerning to me, and I think it is a little bit too much. I think it's decision-making. I think there are times when it works and there's times when it doesn't, and that the decision-making just isn't there. I think maybe that'll come with experience, but who knows? Could very well be. And I think, there is some pressure on Eddie Jones that, by, say, 2025... If we're still coming bottom of the Rugby Championship by that point, Australian rugby might look to strike faster than what they did with Dave Rennie, because you've got superstars like Stephen Larkham in the wings.
Totally.
Who is someone I'd love to see involved in Australian rugby, in Wallabies rugby.
Totally. So that's my first. Again, this is an overreaction from the Rugby Championship. Second one, the Springboks will not make it out of their pool.
That's a big one.
We've talked about how tough their pool is. Ireland, Scotland, Tonga. I see them losing 2 of those games from what they've delivered so far in the Rugby Championship. Now, had a fantastic first game, but again, it was against you Wallabies, so we can't really give them too much now because they got beaten well by the All Blacks and just should have lost to Argentina. I think, again, this is a team that's aging. This is a team that's backed by the 2019 World Cup. Yes, this is, again, it's an overreaction. I'm reaching here. It's a bold claim. I know that. Because this team could easily prove me wrong and win the whole thing. Like, I'm not saying that they can't do that. But I just think, from what I've seen in the Rugby Championship, I think they're vulnerable. And I don't think I've seen South Africa rugby this vulnerable since 2011, 2015 World Cup where teams striked. And Japan, conveniently striked. I see the same type of vulnerability, and I think if South Africa don't turn up at the Rugby World Cup with their head switched on, they get knocked out of the pool. The last overreaction is Argentina will top their pool. I think
I don't think that's too much of an overreaction, though.
It's probably not, but again, they only won 1 game in this Rugby Championship, and they only just won it, controversially as well. I just think you take away their first game, like I'm doing for South Africa. If I take away their first loss to the All Blacks, close win against the Aussies, just about beat South Africa. They've got England in their pool and Japan who Japan hasn't shown me much. Samoa could definitely, they are a surprise package, looking really good in this Pacific Nations Cup. But I just look and I go, Argentina have shown they can beat England in England, so they can definitely go to France. England are in the same situation with Borthwick only recently getting his hands on the English rugby team. So I just go, you know what? With Cheika in charge, Argentina win the pool.
I definitely have England as my second-rated team in that pool, and they could miss out. England could not make it out of the pool. That's not one of my 3 overreactions, though. So I have actually sort of 1 central overreaction with 3 sub-overreactions in that. And my overreaction is that the Wallabies will make it further in the World Cup than either of the All Blacks or the Springboks. Now, the reason for this is just because of the pools. It's because of the pools, right? So Wallabies are in the easiest pool in the competition, right? They've shown improvement every game. I think they've improved every game. Might not be much, but they've improved every game. I think you take the Wallaby squad that was in that New Zealand game and you put them in that game before against Argentina, I think they win that game. I think you take them to South Africa with that squad, I think they perform a lot better than what they did there. I don't know if they necessarily win, but I think they perform a hell of a lot better than what they showed that day. They're in a pool with Wales, who's in the midst of a rugby implosion at the moment. Fiji, who's improving, but I still don't think it's the Wallabies level. Georgia, who's improving, but I don't think it's their level. And Portugal, who, the Waratahs could beat Portugal, right? The Melbourne Rebels could beat Portugal, right? So they should come top of their pool. Then they face the runner-up of Pool D, who we've said Argentina's winning that pool. So that's England, Japan, or Samoa, right? One of those 3. They could beat any of those 3 teams. They could easily beat any of those 3 teams with their performances as they've been lately. I would be more scared to go up against Japan or Samoa than England necessarily at the moment.
Really?
How they're trending. Well, Japan. Maybe not Samoa.
Come on, bud. You lost 2-1 to them in a series last time you played them.
With a different coach.
With the coach that you've got there.
Exactly. So he would know how to beat them.
Okay. I'm just saying. Yeah. Hey, I'm just saying.
Either way, I would be confident going. This is the overreaction section, mate. It's the overreaction section.
Yeah, but that's not what you've said. You've said you're going to get to a semi-final. You didn't say you're going to... Oh, no, that's the quarterfinal. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, but you're saying that England... Your overreaction's gone further than your overreaction because you just overreacted to your overreaction.
Yeah. Okay. Look, I would say... what I'm basically getting at is that I would be confident in the Wallabies in winning their quarterfinal, right? Okay. So that gets them into a semi-final where it's a totally different kettle of fish. We then look at my other 2 overreactions, which is New Zealand will come second in their pool and then lose in the quarterfinal, and South Africa will come second in their pool and also lose in the quarterfinal. That's because in New Zealand's pool is France. Playing at home, we all know France are very good at home. You've been on record at saying that all of their big wins in the last few years have been at home, right? So they're playing at home. It's World Cups at home for them. So, by that logic and where they're ranked in the world at the moment, and how they've been playing, I think France wins that pool. That means New Zealand's got to go up against the winner of Pool B, which I think will be Ireland. And then conversely, South Africa will come second in their pool. They'll have to play France in France. So South Africa will lose that quarterfinal. New Zealand will have to play Ireland. Ireland, who beat them 2-1 in their series last year. New Zealand loses to Ireland. Both those teams out in the quarterfinals. Ipso facto, the Wallabies go further. Then New Zealand and South Africa in the World Cup.
Yeah, that's a massive overreaction.
That is
is the most overreaction of overreactions. I don't think I've heard a bigger overreaction.
I brought the spice. Luke. And it's not saying, and that's not me saying that New Zealand and South Africa are worse than the Wallabies or the Wallabies are better than New Zealand and South Africa. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying purely how this World Cup is set up. It's set you up in a very difficult position.
No, it set us up to beat everyone because you've got to beat everyone to win a Rugby World Cup.
And look, I would say, other than Australia, New Zealand is the next team I would rather win it because you're our Anzac brethren. We're going to have an Anzac 15, Southern Hemisphere, and not South Africa. I mean, of all the teams with a realistic chance, New Zealand is second on my list because I'd much rather them than some Northern Hemisphere pricks or the South Africans. So
fair enough. No,
look, I would hope New Zealand does it, but it's going to be tough.
Yeah, I get it. I just think you're taking vengeance after a tough rugby championship. I think you've sat there, you've had to see 3 losses on the trot. Your saviour Eddie isn't delivering, and you've gone, you know what, bugger South Africa, bugger New Zealand. They're both going out in the quarters, and we're making it further.
I don't know. I mean, you even look at it from a mathematical perspective, which is what the world rugby rankings are right now. That's where the betting odds would be, my friend. I actually
think we just overtook France in the world rankings to go second.
Ooh, spicy.
So
I think France at home, though, is a different kettle of fish, though. France at home during a World Cup.
We're going to embarrass France.
All those mad Frenchmen.
We will be doing our predictions
all those mad
very
Frenchmen
soon.
Upset about their pay and police violence. They need an outlet, and that outlet's going to be rugby.
We'll make sure we do a prediction very soon on this channel, so stay tuned. But for now, thank you for joining That Rugby Podcast on the Sports Booth. My name's been Luke, winner of the Bledisloe from New Zealand, Rugby Championship. That's Hughesy. We will see you next time. Goodbye.